Hello, everyone. Welcome to 10 Questions on Autonomous Procurement. I'm Adrian Gonzalez, founder and host of Talking Logistics. And I'm here with an expert on this topic, Jan Rzehak, who's Director of Business Consulting at Transporeon. And we're here at the Transporeon Summit 2023, where autonomous procurement is one of the innovations that has been discussed a lot at the conference. And we gathered a number of questions from the customers that are here and other attendees. And I did my best to gather the many, many questions that came together and kind of consolidate them into 10 questions. And couldn't get to all of them, but I think the 10 that I selected kind of cover the wide range that we got here. And of course, it's a topic that's getting a lot of attention today due to AI, and companies are interested in learning how to apply this technology in the transportation world, and in particular in procurement. So, ready to get started, Jan?
Ready?
All right, so let's, there were a lot of questions with regards to, what does it mean to be autonomous? How is it automated? So maybe let's start there. I mean, how can the procurement process be automated? How can it be autonomous?
Well, autonomous sounds scary to some of the customers, and probably that's the most important remark up front. You stay in control, right? I talk to a lot of customers and they kind of fear that autonomous sounds scary, they might be losing control over their procurement processes, and that's not the case. So you define the boundaries, you define the range in which the system then can make decisions on its own, using AI, we'll come to that probably later. And in a nutshell, the system makes instantly acceptable offers to the carriers. That's a bit the difference from the classic approaches. So basically, it's predicting a price within the range that you define as a shipper. And then, the carriers can, match now. And that's the beauty of the solution, right? So instead of, placing bids, carriers have the option, if that's somehow acceptable, that price that has been predicted, they can match now and the process is done. They get instantly awarded. So that's a bit like how the system can be automated, autonomous, within the ranges that you define. Huh?
Right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot of still fear, if you will, of what does autonomous mean. And I think one of the things that we will find is that as people learn more about it and they see how the system works, I think that increases the trust level in the system. And I think you just touched upon it a little bit now, but a lot of another question that we got a lot about, there was maybe some confusion or questions about, what's the difference between the traditional spot procurement and autonomous procurement?
Look at the classical bid collection process, right? A shipper puts a load on a platform, or load giver puts a load on some kind of spot bidding platform, and then you have to wait, right? You have to wait for carriers to analyze. Carriers will probably do some math, calculate what is a bid that is kind of, attractive for them. And then as the bids come in, after an hour or two, you make a selection. But it's also not optimal for the carrier side, right? This classic approach, because, they place a bid and they have to wait as well, not knowing if they will get awarded or not. So it's also not the best option for the carrier side. Now, autonomous procurement kind of flips that process upside down. As said, it starts with predicting an offer that seems to be acceptable by the carrier. And then over time, it's going to increase those offers. And then, the idea is the first one who hits the match now button, for whom this price is somehow within, acceptable boundaries, they'll get awarded instantly. So it's kind of the other way around, right? But it's making it very attractive also for the carrier side.
Right. So it sounds like it's really leveraging data science, leveraging the large amounts of data, machine learning, and so forth, to really compress the amount of time and reduce some of the friction and time, if you will, that takes place with the traditional spot procurement process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, another question that came in, there were various questions around this. Trying to understand relative to what you just said right now is, how does autonomous procurement set freight rates and, find capacity and things like that?
Yeah, so it starts with historic information, right? You can use the system also without historic information, but as those systems are smart and will learn over time, the more historic information on your freight rates, you can put, and your spot rates from the past you put into the system, the better, right? What we'll then also need is a walkaway price. That is not going to be shown to the carrier, but that's like what I said at the very beginning. That's the boundaries in which you allow the system to make decisions on its own, right? And then, it's also, as soon as the carrier hits the Match Now button, that is recorded. So the more you utilize the system, the more it will find out like which carriers typically accept at which price. So it gets smarter and smarter over time. So it's AI in action, right? AI is probably the most overused term these days, right? But it's really one of those solutions that is actually, well, ready for prime time. It's operational, and we heard that yesterday also from some customers that made very good experience so far. And with that process, you can achieve automation. That's what we had also in the question number 1, I think. And yesterday we got a confirmation from one of our customers. I'm not sure if they feel comfortable if I mention the name, but they confirmed that they can automate 95% of the loads like this with that simple process. Huh?
That's great. Well, I think that's a great example of machine learning, in
Absolutely.
action, right? Because the more you use the system, and based on what's actually happening on the platform, the system continues to learn and continues to improve that
Exactly.
model. Talking about carriers, I mean, I think a lot of questions, and maybe this was, I assume this question came from the shipper side. They want to know, what's the carrier's response to autonomous procurement? I mean, are they supportive or resistant to it?
Actually, the feedback is quite positive. And let's look at it through the perspective of the carrier. I always like to make that example. Imagine you're a dispatcher, you have an empty truck for tomorrow, and you're searching for a load. It's 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and the perfect load occurs on a classic spot bidding platform. So what do? Let's say the market price is 600 euro on that day, but you go in aggressive because it's your perfect load for the vehicle that you want to equip with the load for the next day. And you go in aggressive and say, like, you put a 400 in, right? You're more or less sure you're going to get awarded. You have probably plans for the evening, watch the game with your son on television, right? And just before you leave the office at 6, you double check if you have been selected, and you have not been selected. Guess what? Someone else was even more aggressive than you. And what happens now is your working day continues, right? So leaving that truck without a load is not an option, so your working day continues, but as it's getting later on the day, you probably end up finding a load at 300, right? Now, if you would have given a chance at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, in my example, to accept that one at 390, instantly, it's yours, right? So you might be tempted, it's probably slightly lower than the 400 I would have placed as a bid, but the 390 actually, it's yours, right? Job done. Your asset is equipped with a load for the next day, and you will watch the game at night. So that's the story that I like to tell, because I think it's that Match Now functionality that's very attractive for the carriers, to really have safety and not blocking a capacity for an hour or two, then realizing you have not been selected. What is also important when you speak about the carriers, it's very popular in the US, and it's more or less coming to Europe, that they also invest in technology to automate the quoting procedures, right? And just yesterday we launched a new product. You have seen that as well, I guess, the autonomous quotation, which is kind of the counterpart on the carrier side. So we enable also carriers, mid-sized ones that don't have those IT capabilities, to automate their quoting procedures, right? So that's why, in a nutshell, feedback so far is very positive.
Great. So, I mean, obviously, the success of this obviously depends on being a win-win value propositions for both the shipper side and the carrier side. Question here about savings, and how can we monitor the savings generated by autonomous procurement versus best carrier during the life of the contract?
Yeah. So what we recommend to our existing Transporeon shippers who want to give it a try, that use best carrier for now to manage spots, is to run a kind of, we call it A/B comparison, right? So you want to remove any bias on market volatility. What you should not do is like compare the best carrier prices of January, February with autonomous procurement March, April, right? That doesn't make sense, right? There's too much risk that the market volatility kind of destroys your KPIs. So what we typically do is we kind of implement a randomizer, for example, placing all odd transport numbers to the best carrier, and then all even transport numbers to the autonomous procurement. Yeah? So 50-50 something. And then you run that kind of A/B comparison, same lanes, same time frame, randomized to avoid any kind of bias for like a duration of 6 weeks, is the best practice, to get a first feeling of what savings you're able to achieve. And results are somewhere between 7 and 12% of savings that we see compared to your current spot approach. So significant savings.
I think that A/B approach makes a lot of sense, because not only, obviously based on the results that you just said, you can show that kind of savings. I think it also going back to what we said before, the trust in the system, right? Because you're able to actually, using real data, see for yourself, what the results would be. Question, this one's kind of related, I guess, to another question, but a little bit different. I mean, how does autonomous procurement decide what price to offer the carriers at any given time? And then there was a kind of related question that I added to this. And how does it set different offers for different carriers?
Yeah. So in general, the walkaway price is the maximum, but obviously you don't start there, you start lower, and it depends a bit like what do you want to optimize. Is it finding capacity as soon as possible, or do you want to optimize cost? Just to give you an example, right? If the system starts with 400 euros and a carrier hits immediately the Match Now button, well, that's great because you secured the capacity, but the system will recognize, okay, probably the 400 was a bit too high because you want to probably try it next time with 380 starting. And then, the system predicts an initial price, and then based on the behavior of the carriers, it's going to adjust. So per carrier, there's an individual strategy on how often and in which intervals you're going to increase the price. And this process goes on until the first carrier hits the Match Now button, right?
So it sounds like going back, it sounds like it's, again, machine learning in practice here. It's using the data in the system, the behaviors in the system to come up with that initial predicted price. And then based on the characteristics of individual carriers, that price can be adjusted, based on the historical factors of that carrier.
And behavior, I mean, if a carrier, for example, we see that he's logged in throughout the day, we probably increase the price in smaller intervals every 15 minutes. And if a carrier is like logging into the system like twice a day, we want to probably increase the prices in bigger intervals, but longer time periods. That's all kind of this machine learning that the system will learn how carriers use the system and make the offers according to their behavior. So, in order to find a carrier that is tempted to put the button. Yeah?
Great. I guess this one's also probably asked by a shipper. Can carriers learn how the system works and try to game the system, try to drive up the costs? And is there any way for the system to kind of prevent this?
Of course, carriers will learn how the system works, right? They will learn that over time prices increase. But here, the point is, obviously you see that the longer you wait, the more likely it is that the offer or the price increases, but there are other carriers who might hit the button in between, right? So the system also adapts the strategy here and there. So it's not always the same interval. It's really per shipment and kind of individual strategy based on the lane, based on service level requirements and all those kind of things, type of vehicle. So yeah, carriers will find out that the system increases the prices over time, but due to the competition that is in place, I mean, there's no chance for carriers to kind of game or cheat the system.
Right. How can customers make sure that year after year this tool still generates savings compared to the spot market?
Well, theoretically, you could go back and do a reverse A/B comparison, kind of. But so far, I've not heard about this in practice. I mean, there are better ways of getting insights to what's going on in the market. Our Market Insights product, for example, it's available now, and it even goes down to zip code level now, at least for road Europe. So I think, yeah, you could go back to your classic approach just to double check if you're still generating the savings compared to your best carrier or the other classic approach that you're using. It's not recommended. I would use other tools to see what's going on in the market and if I'm above or below. Yeah.
Okay. Another question, this was related to AI. I mean, we've been talking a lot through these questions about how the system learns and it's continuously adapting based on the data, based on the behaviors. So this one is how quickly does the AI adapt to market conditions, such as price increases or decreases?
Well, I would say immediately. Why? If you put a shipment and you see that no one is hitting the Match Now button, the price will increase, and the system recognizes, okay, seems something's going on the market, so probably next time I start with a slightly higher offer. So there's almost instantly that the system learns again, okay, seems capacity is getting tighter, so I better try it with a higher price next time in order to ensure that you still get the capacity as fast as possible.
Great. And last question is, can the platform be integrated with Shipper's TMS?
Short answer, yes. Yeah. It's obviously part of our overall Transporeon transportation management platform. So if you're a Transporeon customer, it's probably easier because you're kind of already linked to your IT landscape. But yeah, it can be used as a standalone. So if that is the only product you want to use at this point in time, it's possible. We have standard integrations with the major TMSs out there, also smaller ones. And there's obviously a standard API available, so yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground with regards to autonomous procurement. I'm going to add one more question, which is always has nothing to do with the topic, kind of a spontaneous one here, a fun one. So if you had a time machine, would you prefer to go 100 years in the past or 100 years in the future?
Spontaneous reaction, past. Huh?
And why is that?
Ah, that's a good question. You know, I like historic movies, and I like, you know, how people were living and working without all those technologies. So I would probably like to find out how it is without the internet being around. So yeah, it's a bit old school, I know, but spontaneous answer is like back in time.
You know what, I'm with you. I think I also enjoy history, and I think it'll be fun to go back in time and meet with some famous historical people. And also, you know, while there is great advantages to living in the modern world, I think there's also some fun things about living in a more simpler, less distracting, you know, world with all this technology that we have. So, Jan, thank you very much for making the time, and thank you for watching this episode of 10 Questions on Autonomous Procurement. Again, we didn't get to all the questions, but we certainly covered a lot of ground, and we look forward to having you watch our next episode. Thank you.